North Dakota is in a mental health crisis, but there is help and there is hope. Welcome to It Matters, a series of conversations aimed at fostering mental well-being in North Dakota, presented by Inspired Woman, where every story lights the way. I'm your host, Marci Narum. The effects of childhood trauma can last a lifetime. Many studies have shown a strong relationship between abuse and serious outcomes such as depression, PTSD, substance abuse, health problems, and more. But one agency is leading the way in helping provide healing and prevention of child abuse. I'm happy to welcome Eneida Vilella, the Director of Mental Health Services at the Dakota Children's Advocacy Center. And Eneida, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. How long have you been with the Dakota Children's Advocacy Center?
I've been at the Dakota Children's Advocacy Center for 5 years now.
Okay. And what brought you there?
Well, I graduated from my master's program at UND in counseling and psychology, and I knew that I really wanted to work with kids. And I happened to apply to one job in Bismarck, and it was at the CAC, and I just haven't left since.
Yeah, wonderful. Tell me about the work that you do there.
Yeah, so as the Director of Mental Health Services at the CAC, I wear many hats. I still do see kiddos for therapy. I provide evidence-based practices at the CAC to kiddos, both in Spanish and in English. I also supervise some staff. I do some national trainings, things like that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And can you tell me about the specific services that you provide?
Yeah, so all the therapies we provide at the CAC are evidence-based, so there's a lot of research to back up what we do. Specifically, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. That is a very component-based therapy that builds a toolbox for kiddos to be able to cope with the trauma or abuse that they endured. And they also have a chance during that therapy to tell their story of the trauma. We call that a trauma narrative. And they share that with their safe person, which is typically a caregiver who's bringing them to therapy. We also provide a variety of therapy groups as well, specifically our problematic sexual behavior group, which we provide all over telehealth. We cover the entire state with the help of our telehealth outreach program we launched in 2019. And that's helping kiddos who have maybe broken sexual behavior roles with other kiddos. We have a younger child model, and then we have an adolescent model. And there's a very big component in all the therapies that we provide at the CAC with the caregiver, right? The therapy success works when we have a very involved caregiver. So we do that online group. We do a group in person and over telehealth as well at the CAC called Sparks for teens who have endured maybe an abuse or a stressful event. And the unique piece about that group is that they sit in a room with other kiddos that have also experienced something similar to them, and there is that not feeling so alone piece. But we also provide therapies for adults who have endured maybe their own trauma or are really struggling with the trauma that their child endured, as well as parent-child interaction therapy, which helps kind of coach a caregiver on how to attune and communicate better with their kiddo. So we provide a variety of services.
It's quite a lot, yeah. And good to know that you're also helping the caregiver.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me more about the problematic sexual behavior, that part of the program?
Yeah, so that is a very successful program for us. We do get a lot of referrals from probation officers, kiddos that maybe did engage in some sexual behavior and have been cited, have been recommended for the group. The whole purpose of the group is to teach kiddos skills and maybe some self-control strategies so that that event doesn't occur again. Right? Because just because they made this decision and engaged in this act doesn't define them, right? So that's the whole purpose of teaching them, they are good people, right? And they can make good choices. And the caregiver piece of that is more of a support system for the caregivers. All the caregivers are involved, and it's also a space for them to kind of speak freely on, it's a struggle for everyone. It's a hard space to be in, and you never expect to be in that space as a caregiver. Mm-hmm.
How important is it that there's somebody like you who is bilingual to be in a program like this?
Yeah. Well, specifically in North Dakota, right, there is very few, if any, other bilingual therapists in town. So there are a lot of the times we do get referrals of families that only speak Spanish and need services, right? They have a trauma, they maybe have engaged in a problematic sexual behavior. So it's huge to have someone that maybe looks like them and speaks their native language and they feel seen and heard. So that's really, really important to me. In North Dakota, the population of the Hispanic individuals has grown tremendously in the last few years. So I can say that I have at least over half my caseload are Spanish-speaking families that I see. Yeah.
And there is more than one Dakota Children's Advocacy Center than just the one in Bismarck. So
Yeah.
how do you reach out to the other 8, and where are those, and how do you reach them?
Yeah, so we have our satellite locations in Dickinson and in Jamestown. In Dickinson, we have a forensic interviewer and an advocate out there, but there isn't a therapist, so we provide the telehealth service. So every kiddo can receive the same equal care that they would receive walking into my office. Telehealth works just as well as it does as seeing someone in person at the CAC. So with the other CSCs in North Dakota, under the umbrella of the Children Advocacy Centers of North Dakota, there's a center in Minot and there's one in Fargo, but they also don't have a bilingual therapist. So they have my contact, and I typically do get referrals from them as well.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of telehealth, and it is as effective?
Yes, it is just as effective, and I think that's surprising for people to hear at times. We see about 50% of the kiddos over telehealth. We launched our telehealth outreach program in 2019 prior to COVID. So we were really prepared prior to the pandemic. And there was absolutely no lapse in our services. We provided technology if kiddos or families needed it. And we provided a Zoom link and just kept going on. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Can you explain how abuse of any kind impacts the mental health of a child?
Yeah. It impacts a child in many, many different ways. I like to kind of explain to kiddos that are first starting therapy with me, counseling and trauma, to the analogy of maybe getting a wound, like falling off your bike when you're little or something like that. And what happens if we don't take care of it? Typically that would get infected, right? So if we don't talk about what happened to us, if we don't try to face our trauma or our abuse, it's just going to project in different ways, right? So I really like to explain that to kiddos, because a lot of the times they don't want to talk about what happened, right? But it's really important for them to be able to face that, because then we start seeing, the depression, we start seeing the anxiety, we start seeing that suicidal ideation, that isolating and things like that. So we can't expect a kiddo to sit through a whole day of school, right? And ask them, well, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? If they don't have a support system or have a place to go to talk through what happened and build those skills and kind of move forward from what happened.
What about the impact on the family, the caregiver?
Yeah.
If the caregiver isn't the offender.
Right. It can vary, right? So if you have a very involved caregiver that believes that this happened to this child, they tend to also need their own therapy, right, before they can even be a support for their child. So with the therapies we provide at the CAC, we do a very good job of checking in with that caregiver, providing them tools if they need to, educating them on the signs to watch out for their kiddo and how to support them. Once we're teaching the kiddos the skills in therapy, we encourage the kiddos at the end of session to kind of teach we encourage the kiddos to teach their caregivers the skill back so that the caregiver can also use it. And that way we know that as like the homework for the week, we have both of them know what's going on and what they need to be working on. So yes, caregivers can be very much overwhelmed and very emotional about what happened. So it's really important to keep an eye on that and recommend therapy if need be. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk specifically about the tools that you teach?
Yeah. So we teach a lot of relaxation skills, right? So your deep breathing, your 4-square breathing, maybe some grounding techniques, mindfulness, things like that. I like to provide the kiddos a lot of different options, right? Because one relaxation skill is not going to be a one-size-all for everyone. So I really want them to find something that actually works for them. But we also teach how our thoughts, feelings, and actions are all connected, right? And that how can that can impact us before we jump into telling that narrative of their trauma.
Okay. What are the risks for a child? I guess this goes back to some of the mental health.
Yeah.
But if it's not treated?
Well, it will eventually project in different ways as they get older, right? Maybe they are more depressed. They do kind of gauge into that suicidal ideation, things like that. We typically, if a kiddo isn't ready for therapy, we're never gonna, make them go through therapy. Nothing's gonna be accomplished. But there are the cases that we see where a kiddo might not be ready, and we always provide them opportunity to come back to the CAC and receive that service.
Is it ever too late to start therapy?
It's never too late to start therapy.
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What are some positive outcomes that you've seen in the work that you do?
Yeah, so I have seen a lot of growth in a lot of the families that I've worked with and a lot of the kiddos that I've worked with. I can think of one specific success story that I will continue to talk about probably for the rest of my career. It was just very impactful, but it was a case that came in through forensic interview all the way through our mental health department. And I was involved from the very get-go. That kiddo was very, very suicidal at time of forensic interview. And I was called back to the family room to complete a safety plan with that kiddo because they were very worried for her. And I completed that safety plan, and they left there willing to contract for safety and agreeing to come back for therapy with me. So that kiddo was very standoffish, didn't want to be there, didn't understand why she needed to complete therapy. And it took some time to build rapport, but I did it. And coming from a space at forensic interview where she had an active plan of this is what I'm going to do to showing up every week at my office, maybe not making eye contact, not super engaged, to her being able to tell word for word the narrative of her trauma and seeing a future that she didn't see the first time she stepped foot at our CAC. So I think about that case a lot, and it's like the prime example of how our agency can just hug a family and help them through so many different things. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really life-saving work that
is.
You're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you can think of that I haven't asked you, something that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think that it's really important that people know that this is something that is happening in our area and that we are a support for these families.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, for more information about the Dakota Children's Advocacy Center, call 323-5626. You can send an email at info@dakotacac.org or visit their website, dakotacac.org. That's all for this edition of It Matters. I'm Marci Narum. Join us again next time.